The 70s weren't just bell-bottoms and disco balls. They were the decade when horror grew teeth, when ghosts stopped rattling chains and started destroying souls. These 17 films turned spectral dread into an art form, and decades later, they hit harder than ever. Why? Because the world caught up to their nightmares. Technology, isolation, and the things we suppress have made these stories feel less like fiction and more like warnings. Ready to see what the bell-bottom generation was truly afraid of? Number 17, The Legend of Hell House from 1973. Director John Howe threw physics, science, and skepticism into a haunted mansion and let them battle the supernatural, creating one of the most intellectually violent ghost stories ever filmed. A team of paranormal investigators enters the Belasco house, dubbed Hell House for its body count, where a physicist tries using machines to measure evil while psychics feel their sanity crumbling. The film doesn't play with jump, scares. It weaponizes atmosphere, turning every shadow into a threat and every silence into a scream waiting to happen. Roddy McDowall delivers a performance so fragile you can see him breaking in real time, playing a medium who survived the house once and knows he won't survive it again. The movie's genius lies in its refusal to explain everything, leaving viewers with more questions than answers, more dread than resolution. Critics initially dismissed it as too cerebral for horror fans and too horrific for intellectual audiences, but time proved them spectacularly wrong. The Belasco house remains one of cinema's most oppressive locations, a place where the walls themselves seem to hate you. Modern viewers find it terrifying because it predicted our current obsession with ghost hunting technology and paranormal investigation shows. Except this film shows what happens when you actually find something. The violence isn't physical, it's psychological warfare waged by a presence that knows your deepest shames and uses them as weapons. Richard Matheson adapted his own novel, and he didn't soften a single blow for the screen. Number 16, Don't Look Now from 1973. Nicholas Roeg crafted a masterpiece of grief masquerading as a ghost story, and it still destroys viewers who aren't ready for its emotional brutality. Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie play parents drowning in sorrow after their daughter drowns in a pond, escaping to Venice where they encounter psychics, warnings, and a figure in a red coat that might be their dead child. The film's editing technique was revolutionary, fracturing time and memory until past, present, and future bleed into each other like watercolors in rain. That ending twist remains one of cinema's most devastating gut punches, a moment so perfectly constructed that rewatches only make it more horrifying because you see all the clues you missed. Roeg shot Venice like a beautiful corpse, its canals and alleyways transformed into arteries of a dying organism. The film tackles precognition not as a superpower, but as a curse, showing how seeing the future means watching your doom approach in slow motion. Critics praised its artistry, but audiences found it deeply unsettling, unable to categorize it as horror or drama because it functioned as both simultaneously. The movie earned controversy for its intensely realistic intimacy between Sutherland and Christie, a scene that felt necessary for showing their desperate attempt to reconnect through physical connection. Modern viewers understand it better now, because we've all learned how grief distorts reality, how loss makes you see things that might or might not be there. The scariest element isn't supernatural. It's watching someone ignore every warning because accepting the truth means accepting unbearable loss. Number 15. The Changeling from 1980. George C. Scott battles a ghost in a mansion, and the ghost wins by turning grief into fury, creating one of the most emotionally complex hauntings in film history. Scott plays a composer who loses his family and rents a historical mansion in Seattle, discovering that a murdered child's spirit inhabits the house and wants justice after decades of silence. The film builds terror through sound design more than visuals, using a bouncing ball and ghostly wheelchair to create dread that seeps into your bones. That seance scene remains legendary, with the spirit spelling out its tragic story through mediums and table rapping, while everyone watches their sanity questioned. Director Peter Medak understood that real horror comes from injustice, from crimes that society buried and forgot, making the ghost sympathetic rather than simply scary. The revelation that powerful people murdered a disabled child for inheritance money carries weight that supernatural scares alone could never achieve. Scott's performance anchors everything, showing a man who understands loss trying to give another lost soul peace. Critics recognized it immediately as superior ghost storytelling, though it never achieved mainstream blockbuster status. Modern audiences find it scarier because we now know how often the powerful commit crimes and escape justice, how institutions protect abusers while silencing victims. The mansion itself becomes a character, its rooms holding secrets that demand exposure no matter how much time passes. The film proves that ghosts don't haunt houses, they haunt consciences. Number 14. The Haunting of Julia, from 1977. Mia Farrow escapes her husband after their daughter's death and discovers that grief opens doors to malevolent spirits, making this psychological horror far more disturbing than traditional haunted house fare. She moves into a London townhouse where a murdered girl's presence manifests, but the genius lies in questioning whether the hauntings are external or projections of Farrow's fractured mental state. Director Richard Long Crane adapted Peter Straub's novel and preserved its ambiguity, refusing to clarify what's supernatural and what's psychological breakdown. Farrow delivers a performance of stunning vulnerability, making viewers feel her isolation and desperation as she investigates the house's history and uncovers child murder. The film moves slowly, deliberately, building unease through Farrow's increasing disconnection from reality and her dangerous obsession with the dead girl. Critics were divided, some finding it too subtle, while others praised its refusal to provide easy answers or conventional scares. The supporting cast treats Farrow like she's losing her mind, and the viewer shares their uncertainty because the film never confirms or denies the supernatural elements. Modern viewers appreciate it more because we've evolved past needing explicit scares, understanding that true horror lives in uncertainty and mental deterioration. The movie suggests something genuinely terrifying, that trauma can make you vulnerable to possession or obsession, that grief can destroy you from within or invite something worse. The ending refuses resolution, leaving viewers as unsettled as Farrow's character, questioning everything they witnessed. Number 13. Let's Scare Jessica to Death, from 1971. This cult classic takes a recently discharged psychiatric patient to a farmhouse where she encounters what might be a vampire, or might be her own relapsing mental illness. And that uncertainty makes it brilliantly terrifying. Zora Lampert plays Jessica with heartbreaking fragility, a woman desperate to believe she's recovered while experiencing supernatural events that everyone dismisses as delusions. Director John Hancock shot it with dreamlike haziness that blurs reality and hallucination until viewers share Jessica's confusion about what's real. The film works as horror and as a meditation on how society treats mental illness, how dismissing someone's experiences can enable actual threats. That scene where Jessica sees a corpse surface in the lake remains chilling because you can't tell if it's supernatural or her mind breaking again. The vampire figure, if she is a vampire, operates through seduction and manipulation rather than traditional blood-sucking, making her threat subtler and more insidious. Critics ignored it upon release, but horror fans discovered it later, recognizing its sophisticated approach to unreliable narration. The low budget forced creative solutions, resulting in atmosphere-driven terror rather than effects-based scares. Modern viewers find it especially relevant because we've become more aware of gaslighting, of how abusers make victims question their own perceptions. The film's ambiguous ending offers no comfort, suggesting Jessica might be right, might be wrong, or might be experiencing something worse than either option. It proves that the scariest stories leave you uncertain, questioning what you witnessed and what it meant. Number 12. The Asphyx from 1973. Victorian scientists photograph death itself and discover a creature that appears at the moment of dying, then attempt to capture immortality with horrifying consequences that make this wildly original film unforgettable. Robert Stevens plays a researcher who identifies a spirit that appears during death, naming it the Asphyx after Greek mythology, then devises a method to trap it and prevent death. The film combines period drama with horror and science fiction, creating something entirely unique that asks what happens when humans cheat mortality. Director Peter Newbrook explores the ethics of immortality through increasingly grim experiments, showing how the pursuit of eternal life corrupts and destroys relationships. The special effects, primitive by modern standards, somehow make the Asphyx more unsettling, its indistinct form suggesting something that shouldn't be visible to human eyes. The story escalates into genuine tragedy as the protagonist's family becomes collateral damage in his obsession, leading to a finale that punishes hubris magnificently. Critics didn't know what to make of it, unable to categorize it cleanly as horror, drama, or philosophical inquiry. The film flopped commercially but gained appreciation from viewers who recognized its ambitious blend of ideas and terror. Modern audiences find it prescient because we're now seriously discussing life extension and defeating aging, making the film's warnings about immortality feel urgently relevant. The Asphyx itself represents something genuinely frightening. The idea that death is a creature that attends every dying, waiting. The movie suggests that some natural processes shouldn't be interfered with, that death serves a purpose we tamper with at our peril. Number 11. Messiah of Evil from 1973. This fever dream of a film follows a woman searching for her artist father in a coastal California town where residents are transforming into undead cultists, awaiting a messiah from the sea, and it's absolutely deranged. Gloria Katz and Willard Huyck directed this experimental horror that feels like a nightmare you can't wake from, filled with surreal imagery and dread-soaked atmosphere. The film's most famous sequences, including a woman being devoured in a movie theater and an attack in a supermarket, are masterclasses in building inescapable terror. The narrative intentionally fragments, refusing linear storytelling in favor of disorienting viewers the same way the protagonist feels disoriented in this wrong town. Critics largely ignored it, and it vanished into obscurity until horror scholars rediscovered it decades later and recognized its avant-garde brilliance. The movie operates on dream logic, where normal spaces like grocery stores and theaters become killing grounds without warning or explanation. The cult awaits something rising from the ocean, but the film never fully explains what's coming, leaving that dread open-ended and infinite. Color and production design dominate, with the father's house filled with disturbing paintings that seem to predict or cause the town's corruption. Modern viewers appreciate it as a precursor to more experimental horror, proving that incoherence can be a feature rather than a bug when creating dread. The transformation of ordinary citizens into undead cultists speaks to fears about conformity and loss of individuality that feel even more relevant now. The film's ending offers no resolution, just the spreading infection and the implication that this horror will continue consuming communities. It's proof that low-budget horror can achieve artistic ambition and genuine terror simultaneously. Number 10. The Wicker Man from 1973. A devout Christian policeman investigates a missing child on a Scottish island where pagans practice ancient rituals, and what starts as a mystery becomes a confrontation between belief systems with a finale that burns itself into cinema history. Edward Woodward plays Sergeant Howe with rigid certainty that makes his journey more devastating, a man whose faith blinds him to the trap closing around him. Director Robin Hardy created a folk horror masterpiece that treats paganism seriously rather than as simple devil worship, making the islanders' beliefs feel authentic and their worldview coherent. Christopher Lee delivers one of his finest performances as Lord Summerisle, the island's leader who guides Howe toward an ending the sergeant cannot imagine. The film subverts detective story conventions, turning the investigator into the investigated, making his virtue the very thing that dooms him. That climax, with the massive wicker structure burning, remains one of horror's most powerful images, a sacrifice that's presented as logical within the islanders' belief system. Critics initially dismissed it, but audiences recognized something profound about religious conflict and cultural clash that mainstream horror avoided. The movie was butchered by its studio, with footage destroyed, making later restorations partial reconstructions of Hardy's original vision. Modern viewers find it terrifying because it shows how easily outsiders can be manipulated and destroyed by insular communities with different value systems. The islanders aren't portrayed as evil, but as people following their own moral code, which makes their actions somehow worse than if they were simple villains. The film questions whose beliefs deserve respect and who gets to judge others' faith, questions that remain explosively relevant. Number 9. The Sentinel from 1977. A fashion model rents a Brooklyn Heights apartment and discovers she's been positioned as the next guardian of a gateway to hell, with demons disguised as eccentric neighbors trying to drive her insane before she accepts her destiny. Christina Rains plays Allison, whose history of mental illness and personal trauma make her vulnerable to manipulation by both sides of the supernatural battle. Director Michael Winner filled the cast, with legendary actors including Ava Gardner, Burgess Meredith, and Christopher Walken, each playing roles that blur lines between human and demonic. The film's most controversial choice was casting people with real disabilities as demons in the climax, a decision that sparked outrage and accusations of exploitation. Winner defended it as showing hell's reality, though modern viewers rightfully question the ethics of that portrayal regardless of intention. The movie builds slowly, with Allison's investigation into her building's history, revealing layers of Catholic mythology and cosmic horror. Critics hated it, calling it derivative of Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, but audiences flocked to its mix of religious terror and grotesque imagery. The revelation of Allison's purpose, that she must become an immortal sentinel guarding Hell's Gate, transforms personal horror into cosmic duty. The apartment building itself, a real Brooklyn location, becomes a character that traps and transforms those who enter seeking simple shelter. Modern viewers struggle with its problematic elements while recognizing its effectiveness as pure nightmare fuel that commits fully to its bizarre premise. The film suggests that faith demands impossible sacrifices, that serving a higher purpose means surrendering your humanity and desires. That ending, with Allison accepting her role and a new tenant beginning the cycle again, implies this horror continues eternally. Number 8. The Devil's Reign from 1975. A satanic cult leader played by Ernest Borgnine seeks a book containing souls he's trapped, leading to one of horror's most melting finales and introducing the world to a very young John Travolta as a cultist. The plot involves generational curses, soul trapping, and revenge that spans centuries, all delivered with earnest intensity that makes the absurdity somehow work. Director Robert Fuest embraced practical effects spectacularly, creating that legendary climax where cultists literally melt into wax puddles when their power source is destroyed. The Church of Satan's Anton LaVey served as technical advisor, lending authenticity to the ritual scenes and generating controversy that boosted publicity. William Shatner leads the cast with his characteristic intensity, playing a man trying to rescue his family from damnation while battling Borgnine's eyeless demon preacher. Critics savaged it as ridiculous, and they weren't entirely wrong, but the film's commitment to its gonzo premise creates entertainment that transcends conventional quality. Tom Skerritt and Joan Prather round out the cast, all delivering performances that take the material deadly seriously despite its inherent campiness. The movie flopped hard financially, but became a staple of late-night television and home video, finding audiences who appreciated its weird energy. Modern viewers see it as gloriously excessive 70s horror, the kind of swinging for the fences filmmaking that studios rarely greenlight anymore. The soul-trapping book concept, while silly, taps into genuine fears about damnation and having your essence imprisoned beyond death. That melting sequence influenced countless horror films afterward, proving that a single spectacular scene can earn a movie immortality. It's proof that sincerity and spectacle can overcome narrative weakness when crafted with sufficient conviction. Number 7. Burnt Offerings from 1976. A family rents a summer mansion for an impossibly low price and discovers the house feeds on death and deterioration, making them complicit in their own destruction through simple occupancy. Karen Black and Oliver Reed play parents who ignore increasingly obvious warnings because they're trapped by economic necessity and desire for temporary luxury. The house doesn't need demons or ghosts. It operates through psychological manipulation, making residents obsess over maintaining it while it drains their life force. Director Dan Curtis, famous for Dark, Shadows, understood Gothic atmosphere and deployed it mercilessly, making the mansion beautiful and malevolent simultaneously. Bette Davis plays the family aunt who recognizes the danger but cannot convince others to leave before it's too late. The film's scariest element is watching the family rationalize obvious threats, seeing them choose the house over their own safety because they're invested in the fantasy it represents. That chauffeur figure who haunts the property remains ambiguous, possibly death itself, or the house's previous victim, or something else entirely. Critics appreciated its slow burn approach, but audiences expecting explicit horror found it frustrating, missing the point that domesticity itself becomes the weapon. The ending delivers devastating poetic justice, with the house claiming its new caretakers and preparing to trap the next desperate family. Burgess Meredith plays the owner who lures victims with perfect politeness, never technically lying, but omitting every crucial truth. Modern viewers find it painfully relevant because we understand housing crises, economic desperation, and how people compromise safety for affordability they can barely achieve. The movie suggests that some deals are too good to be true because the price isn't measured in money. Number 6. Beyond the Door from 1974. Italian exploitation cinema gave us this Exorcist knockoff about a pregnant woman possessed by a demon who wants her unborn child, and it's somehow more deranged than that description suggests. Juliet Mills plays Jessica, whose pregnancy becomes supernaturally violent as the demon inside her manifests through telekinesis, levitation, and personality changes. Director Ovidio Assonidis borrowed heavily from Friedkin's masterpiece, but added Italian exploitation's signature excess, including bizarre dream sequences and a supernatural pimp named Dimitri. The film was sued by Warner Bros. For copyright infringement, but made enough money that the legal troubles became promotional tools. Mills commits fully to the possession, contorting and growling through scenes that demand physical and emotional extremes. The movie includes genuinely strange choices, like having Jessica's children behave in creepily adult ways that suggest corruption spreading beyond the protagonist. Richard Johnson plays Jessica's husband with the bewilderment of a man watching his marriage become a supernatural nightmare he cannot comprehend. Critics dismissed it as shameless exploitation, which it absolutely is, but that exploitation is executed with such commitment that it achieves its own manic energy. The demon's motivation, wanting to possess a child before birth, adds disturbing layers about innocence corrupted from the very beginning of existence. Modern viewers appreciate it as peak 70s Italian horror, where logic surrenders to atmosphere and shock value becomes the primary goal. The climax in a hospital delivery room transforms medical trauma into supernatural battleground, mixing body horror with demonic invasion. It proves that imitation can entertain even when it lacks originality, that execution matters more than innovation when crafted with sufficient madness. Number 5. The Reincarnation of Peter Proud from 1975. A man experiences vivid dreams of being murdered in a past life and tracks down his killer, discovering she's still alive, and her daughter is the woman he's falling in love with in this life, creating impossible moral dilemmas. Michael Sarrazin plays Peter with increasing desperation as his past life memories intensify, driving him toward confrontation with his previous existence. Director J. Lee Thompson adapted Max Ehrlich's novel and preserved its exploration of reincarnation as curse rather than spiritual growth. The film functions as psychological thriller and horror, questioning whether past lives should stay buried and whether knowledge of previous existences destroys current happiness. Margot Kidder plays the daughter, unaware she's becoming romantically involved with her murdered father reincarnated, a relationship that becomes deeply uncomfortable as Peter's memories clarify. Jennifer O'Neill portrays the wife who murdered Peter in his previous life, still alive decades later and horrified when he reappears seeking answers. The movie forces viewers to consider justice across lifetimes, whether crimes committed in one existence should be punished when the criminal has aged into elderly vulnerability. Critics found it disturbing and praised its willingness to explore reincarnation's dark possibilities rather than treating it as mystical hope. The inevitable climax forces Peter to choose between exposing his murderer and protecting his current life, with the film refusing to provide comfortable resolutions. Modern audiences find it fascinating because we're more open to reincarnation concepts now, making the film's questions about identity and justice across lives feel more urgent. The ending suggests that some patterns repeat eternally, that unresolved trauma follows souls through multiple existences, demanding resolution. Number 4. Dead of Night from 1975. This anthology television movie traumatized an entire generation with 3 stories about supernatural revenge and unavoidable fate, proving that network television could deliver serious horror. The wraparound story involves a woman receiving warnings about her son's death, with each tale demonstrating that fighting destiny only ensures it arrives. Ed Begley Jr. stars in the first segment about a soldier who returns from death with vampiric tendencies, transforming homecoming joy into family horror. Joan Hackett anchors the second tale about a woman haunted by the car that killed her son, a vehicle that keeps reappearing no matter how she tries to destroy it. The final segment features a drowned woman returning to reclaim her son, played with eerie determination that makes maternal love terrifying. Director Dan Curtis, working in television after Dark Shadow's success, proved that small screen restrictions couldn't limit atmosphere and dread. Each story punishes characters for trying to avoid fate or deny death, suggesting that acceptance is the only response to mortality. The production values, limited by television budgets, forced reliance on performance and suggestion rather than elaborate effects. Critics praised it as exceptional television horror, and its broadcast traumatized young viewers who stumbled across it expecting typical TV fare. Modern viewers seeking it out discover that its reputation remains justified, that these stories still deliver effective supernatural dread. The anthology format allows exploration of different horror subgenres, from vampire infection to vehicular haunting to aquatic resurrection. It proves that horror doesn't need theatrical budgets or explicit content to devastate audiences, that suggestion and performance create terror that lingers. Number 3. The Godsend from 1980. A pregnant stranger abandons her newborn with a family, and the child grows into something that destroys every other child around her through supernatural means that the film refuses to explain. Malcolm Stoddard and Sid Heyman play parents who accept this foundling and watch their own children die mysteriously while the stranger's child thrives. Director Gabrielle Beaumont adapted Bernard Taylor's novel and maintained its ambiguity about whether the child is demonic, alien, or something else entirely. The film operates through implication and parental dread, showing a family's helplessness as they realize they've welcomed something deadly into their home. The stranger who leaves the baby appears and disappears throughout, suggesting she's not human, and this cycle of abandonment and destruction repeats perpetually. Each death feels inevitable once the pattern becomes clear, trapping the parents in knowledge that comes too late to save their biological children. Critics barely noticed it, but horror fans discovered it later and recognized its disturbing effectiveness at portraying parental impotence against supernatural threats. The movie never explains what the child is or why she kills, leaving that void open for viewers to fill with their worst imaginings. Modern audiences find it especially unsettling because it taps into adoption anxieties and fears about children who seem wrong from the beginning. The film's low-budget, forced focus on performance and suggestion, making the horror psychological rather than visual. That ending offers no resolution, just the implication that the stranger will repeat this cycle with another unsuspecting family. It proves that explaining the monster can defang it, that mystery preserves fear. Number 2. The Legacy from 1978. An American couple gets trapped on an English estate where wealthy cultists gather to determine who inherits a demon's power, mixing old world horror with new world skepticism until skepticism dies. Catherine Ross and Sam Elliott play the doomed couple whose motorcycle accident leads them to a mansion they cannot escape. Director Richard Marquand created a slasher film where the killer is invisible, a demonic force that murders cultists one by one until only the chosen heir remains. The setup traps modern, rational Americans in Gothic supernatural conspiracy, using their disbelief as the obstacle that delays their understanding until escape becomes impossible. Roger Daltrey appears in a supporting role, playing one of the cultists who realizes too late that this gathering will claim his life. The film delivers creative deaths as the demon eliminates candidates, each murder demonstrating power that cannot be fought with conventional weapons or logic. Critics dismissed it as Omen knockoff, missing how it subverts inheritance horror by making the legacy something the protagonist desperately wants to refuse. The mansion itself operates as trap and temple, its walls sealing to prevent escape once the ritual begins. Ross's character must choose between accepting demonic power or dying with the other rejected candidates, a choice the film presents without moral judgment. Modern viewers appreciate it as elevated exploitation, taking a thin premise and executing it with sufficient craft and atmosphere to make it work. The ending suggests that refusing power might be impossible once you're selected, that some destinies claim you regardless of will. It proves that familiar formulas can still satisfy when delivered with confidence and competent filmmaking. Number 1. Audrey Rose from 1977. A man claims a couple's daughter is the reincarnation of his dead child and demands access to her, leading to courtroom battles over souls, custody, and whether reincarnation can be proven legally. Anthony Hopkins plays the grieving father with quiet intensity that makes his obsession sympathetic rather than simply creepy. Marsha Mason and John Beck portray the parents whose lives shatter when this stranger inserts himself, claiming spiritual connection to their daughter. Director Robert Wise, who made The Haunting, brings legitimacy and craft to material that could easily become exploitation. The film takes reincarnation seriously as religious belief and legal question, with courtroom sequences debating whether past lives have claims on present ones. Susan Swift plays the daughter with eerie conviction during regression sequences, where she supposedly channels memories of dying in a car fire. The movie forces viewers to consider whether parents own their children's souls, or whether spiritual identity transcends biological relationships. Critics praised Hopkins and the film's serious approach, but audiences found it too cerebral, wanting clearer horror elements instead of philosophical inquiry. The regression scenes deliver genuine terror as the child experiences past life trauma, her screams suggesting agony that transcends current existence. Modern viewers find it fascinating because we're more aware of recovered memory controversies and debates about children's autonomy in religious and spiritual contexts. The ending refuses simple resolution, suggesting that some questions about soul and identity cannot be answered satisfactorily within legal or religious frameworks. It proves that horror can emerge from ideas rather than monsters, that questions about existence and consciousness can terrify more than physical threats. These 17 films understood something we're only now fully grasping, that the scariest ghosts aren't floating bedsheets, but reflections of our deepest fears about death, identity, and loss of control. The 70s didn't just make ghost stories. They made warnings about what happens when we ignore the supernatural, dismiss the inexplicable, or try to cheat mortality itself. Which of these films destroyed your peace of mind? Or are you convinced that modern horror surpassed everything this decade created? Drop your ranking in the comments, defend your choice, and tell me which one you'll never watch alone at night. Here's the real question, though. Are these movies scarier today because society changed, or because we finally understand what they were really saying all along?